tonight we are wrapping up our series, and we're just going to get right into it. One of the things that I love about being in New York City are all the things that you see that are completely inexplicable, that like make no sense, and have no like rationale behind like why or what. And you know, just some things that you see you just can't like justify or like rightly explain. And to kind of help illustrate that, I found like a few pictures that I think like prove the point. So like here's the first one. Is this guy like who wants to take his dog out, but obviously doesn't want to walk his dog, and so he doesn't want to have like a man bag and carry his dog around. So he straps him onto this little like ergo thing. And I get it. It kind of looks like he's in Times Square, but like, you know, so maybe you don't want people to trip up. But the thing that like got me kind of perplexed is like, what if his dog pees? What do you do then? I mean, like, obviously it's covered, so it's not gonna like projectile shoot at someone, but like, it's gonna get wet and like drip down his back. Like, if it's a hot day, it looks like it's like kind of warm. Like, you know, you might just think it's like back sweat or something, and like, yeah, it's just like kind of like so why would you do this to your dog? And then obviously be something for the internet to look at for the rest of humanity. So that's like, you know, you're just kind of like, okay, maybe there's a reason for it. You can kind of try to work your way to one. But this next one is a little bit more confusing. It's a stroller that's been chained to a tree. And like,
so genius.
There's two things about this that got me. One is they thought there was enough value in this stroller to chain it, but they didn't see enough value to like chain it nicely. Like, it's just like, let's push the thing over, like tie it down like this. And the second thing is like none of you have babies that we know of, and so like, let me explain this. This is a Graco like stroller, okay? Graco is kind of like the entry level stroller. Now it might be like $150, and that's not like super cheap, but it ain't like the Mercedes-Benz of strollers. So like, if you're worried about someone taking this thing, it's not like it's irreplaceable. And so they just kind of locked this up. And like, I don't know if it's a yellow cab, so it's probably in Manhattan, because it's not the other boroughs. I mean, maybe it's South Bronx or something. I don't know. So maybe there's a legitimate threat where like strollers are a hot item on the street, and so you just have to lock this thing up to protect yourself. But still, nonetheless, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The most perplexing thing I found was this one.
No.
Like, how does this happen? You're on the train, you hear the ding-ding, like the doors are about to close, you think, oh crap, I shouldn't be on here. And you run
But just your head.
and you just nick it. Like, not your arm, not a leg, like straight up and neck. And this is legitimate. Like, this is totally true. This happened in April on the 4 train. And like, the funny thing about this is like, it's a video. Like, you can go watch this. And the best part about this are the people who walk by, look at her, and then just keep walking. Nobody, like 3 people, like just completely, like nobody says like, you okay? Like, you need a hand? Like, and you hear like the bells going off in the background, like the doors like are trying to like reopen and shut. And this poor lady is like neck deep in this door. Like, this one makes 0 sense. Like, absolutely 0 sense. Like how this happens. I just can't even imagine like what ran through her mind. Yeah, at least she's got a scarf, right? Like, there's nothing in this that makes sense. And I bring all these to attention because maybe like that's what you find or feel like about your wilderness. Like, what's the point? Not that like you're stuck in an elevator or stuck in a like subway door, but like when you brave the wilderness, you're like, and you come through it on the other side, a part of you happens to wonder or wants to think like, why? Like, why did I go through that? What was the point of it? Or what was it for? What was kind of the end goal in this? And those are like legitimate questions, right? Those are all things that we ask. Like, those are things that we like, why did I have to lose everything and this person had it so easy? Like, I had a friend in college and I was like scraping like 2-3 jobs trying to like pay my way through school on my own. And this guy had like a brand new car, his payments were paid for. Like, he was like, hey, you want to go to the beach? I'm like, no, I got this thing called work. Like, this is what I have to do. And like, you know, it was just like so easy for him. Now he's a likable guy, thank God, because if not, like, you just hate him. Part of me is like, why is it that like he has it so easy? And maybe you felt that way. Like, why is it that your journey is difficult? Why is it that you face challenges? Why is it that you've had to go through the things that you've gone through, and this person over here has like none of that, and they feel like they get way more reward than what you work for? Or why is it that like you've gone through a season where you've lost all these relationships where family members or friends or people that you work with have been kind of negative or ridicule what you're doing or question like your integrity or your character or your decision-making ability, and they're like, what? Like, you know, nothing of that makes sense, and you realize like, man, I've gone through this whole thing and I've lost like any meaningful relationship I had before I went into this whole season. Or why is it that like I went to school for this or I'm going to school for that, and all of a sudden like my whole world is flipped upside down and I have this different career path or I have this different job that I have to kind of feel like I'm settling on just because like, you know, what was the point? What was the point in spending all of this money on this education or on this track if it didn't lead to what I wanted it to lead to or what I assumed it would lead to? And listen, I get it. Like, those are all worthy questions. And the reality is, like, we face that even like as we lead the church. We were like, you know, we know people who seemingly have everything they need to start the church. They have like a facility, they have a venue. There's another person I know who started a church not far from here, and like they were just gifted like a $2 million building. Like someone just said, "Oh, here, you can have it." I'm thinking they don't need it. Like they've got like money, they've got resources, and he's good looking. It's like he's got everything he needs. Like, why can't I get the building? And like, you know, we wonder that. Like, we think through that, and I think that's just a very human thing. Because at the end of the day, we all wonder, we have this question in mind that we want to answer, and we want to know the answer to this question is the purpose of the wilderness worth the cost? Is the purpose of the wilderness worth the cost? Because in the wilderness, we learn some things, don't we? We learn things about ourselves that we don't always like. We learn things about other people that we're not very fond of. We lose some things. We sacrifice some things. We give up some things that we wanted because we don't have time or we're not capable of holding them, or they cost too much, or we can't even like shift our focus onto that because the demands of the season that we're in are too exhausting. You know, we surrender some other ideals or dreams that we may have had. And we get through all this stuff. We get to the other side, and the question we want to know the answer to is the purpose worth the cost? Like, was it worth it? And my short answer and my kind of concise answer to that is yes. Like, it is. And the reason it is because of this, like, we don't always see the full picture. Even once you've come through the wilderness season, even once you've gotten onto the other side of it, what you think is the answer, or what you see as the purpose, or what you see as kind of the intent of that whole season is just a small fragment of the full picture. And the reason why, and the reason for that is because the purpose of the wilderness is always connected to people, not just the person. The purpose of the wilderness is always connected to people, not just the person. What that means is this: your wilderness season isn't just about you, it's about others. Our wilderness season as a church isn't just about Chris and I, it's about other people. God has a far greater picture, God has a far greater purpose for that season of your life than what you would imagine or what you would envision for yourself. Because let's be honest, like, we're a little bit egocentric. And so like it's very easy and like natural for us to think that the world revolves around us. Like, we know it revolves around the sun, but really, you know, I mean, really? It's me. You know, like, this is New York, the only city in the world where 8.5 million people all think that what they have to do is far more important than the other 8.49999 million people. Mm-hmm. Like, we just think like, okay, so if I went through that, it must be entirely about me. If that's what I had to go through, then it must be about me, because no one else went through it. I went through it. And so that must mean that something is about me, or that this outcome is for me or for my benefit. And we miss the focus, or we miss the purpose, or the greater reality that God says, no, this isn't about you, because your destiny is connected to others. And so why you went through that and what you had to go through wasn't just about you, Krista. It's about you and the people you're connected to. It wasn't just about you, Jake, but it's about you and the people you're connected to. Because God doesn't just see an individual, he sees humanity as a whole. And his vision and his picture for the church, for you know, his redemptive love doesn't just span from my living room to my bedroom and that's it. The scope and the breadth and the reach of it goes far beyond my life and what happens in my life. And so his purpose and his vision for it is far greater. And this is exactly what he says In Zechariah chapter 8, he speaks this where we've been following the story of like the Israelites moving back to Jerusalem. And so they've made it back. They're getting ready to do the work on the temple. And this is what God speaks through the prophet Zechariah in chapter 8, verse 13. He says, among the other nations, Judah and Israel became symbols of a cursed nation, but no longer. Now I will rescue you and make you both a symbol and a source of blessing. So don't be afraid, be strong, and get on with rebuilding the temple. This is what God says to him. He says, listen, you were once a curse. You were once kind of scorned and shamed. But now I'm making you both a blessing, a source and a symbol. You're going to be elevated. You're going to be both the picture and the provider of blessing.
That's good.
You see the symbol, you think about like a building that has a symbol of some kind on it, right? Like a symbol labels it, it brands it, and most of the time it's set up, it's propped up where people actually have to look to it. And God said to the city of Jerusalem, to the Israelites, to the people moving back, he said, your responsibility, or what I'm doing for you, is to bless you so that you'll be a symbol and a source. As I lift you up, blessing comes down. And this picture is exactly what God wants for you and I. He wants to elevate you, and he wants to make you both a picture of blessing and a provider of blessing. You're not just blessed so that you can hold on to the blessing, but you're blessed so that you can bless others. And you think of that same kind of analogy you run out or stretched out, like a picture or a photo you mount or you place where people will see. You position it where people will recognize. And oftentimes, if it's in your home or at your workspace, what people do is, hey, what about this? Tell me the story with that. And it gives you opportunity to share of that moment, to share of that experience, to offer something that someone else didn't have before. Whether it's knowledge, memory, experience, joy, peace, or whatever comes with that stuff. And so God wanted to take the Israelites and he wanted to kind of position them and prop them up and say, now to the nations that once mocked you, the people that thought you were like stupid, the people that thought you were dumb, the people who thought you were crazy for trying to make your way back to Jerusalem to rebuild this temple, I'm going to elevate you. And to those people, you will be the symbol of my love. You will be the symbol of my redemption. You'll be the symbol of who I am. And out of that symbol, or out of that symbolism, comes all this source of blessing.
So good, Ruby.
And that's what God wants to do for each and every one of us through the wilderness season. And the only way that we'll get to experience the full purpose that God has for us in the wilderness is when we see this as the case, and then we follow it with two kind of critical steps. And so I want to share these two things with you, and we're going to talk about what it takes, because if you want to experience the fullness of the purpose or the intent, because again, it's easy to go through the wilderness and feel like, you know, like I gave it my best shot, I went through it, but it wasn't worth it. And if you're like me, who wants to evaluate something, not because I'm like, you know, micromanaging or critical, but like when I go through stuff, like my curiosity is like, man, what's the point? Like, how do I maximize this and make it worth it? Even if it's only in my mind and in my heart, because I just don't want to feel like I wasted something in life, wasted a pain, wasted an opportunity, wasted a blessing. Like, I want it to be something that actually goes beyond me. And if that's the case for you, and if you want that to matter in your life, then there's two things you've got to do. And it starts with this. You've got to celebrate your journey. You've got to celebrate your journey. This is what the scriptures say in verse 19 of the same chapter. God speaking again, he says, this is what the Lord of Heaven's army says. The traditional fast and times of mourning you have kept in early summer, midsummer, autumn, and winter are now ended. They will become festivals of joy and celebration for the people of Judah. So love truth and love peace. And he says, the traditional times of fasting and mourning you've kept, those festivals will now become festivals of joy and celebration. And so you've got to celebrate the journey. Sometimes I think the hardest thing to do is to go back to the place we just left. Right? Like if you've gone through a wilderness season that's difficult, that's challenging, that's hard, that's frustrating, that's discouraging, that leaves you kind of feeling empty-handed, or like you've been flushed out and you've got nothing left to offer. Like the last thing we want to do is go back there. The last thing we want to do is revisit that. We don't even want to think about it. So then like that was then and this is now. Like I'm out of that, thank God. I want nothing to do with it. I don't want to recall it. I don't want to be reminded of it. I don't even want to remember what I felt, because I was so low. I was so desperate. I was so alone. And I had nothing to offer that I don't even want to remember what that feeling feels like. You hear this all the time in like a lot of success stories, right? Like the rags to riches stories. And like you're like, okay, what motivates you now? You have all this success. And they respond like, I don't want to go back to where I came from. Yet God says the healthiest thing you can do is to go back to where you came from. Those times of mourning, those times of weeping are now going to be turned into times of celebration and times of joy. You see, you got to remember, like when I had nothing, when I went into this season and everyone left me, and it felt like I was all by myself, and it felt like I was left to kind of decide these massive, critical decisions with nobody's input, with nobody's help, or nobody's direction. Like, and I had nothing, somehow God provided everything. Mm-hmm. Somehow God gave me this, and somehow God gave me this answer, and somehow this provision came through. Like, you want to think about that time where, like, man, when everyone abandoned me, and it felt like I was isolated and alone and rejected and, like, wounded. When I went through, like, that season because I wasn't, like, the cool person to be around anymore, because I didn't have anything to offer someone that could benefit them, or my like, hurt or my pain dragged on too long, and all those people walked away. Like, you look back on that and you realize, like, oh wait, but then so-and-so came to my life at that time. Mm-hmm. And God provided this connection, and if it weren't for this connection, I wouldn't have this job, or if it weren't for this relationship, I wouldn't have this opportunity, and if it weren't for God bringing this person in my life when I was unwilling to look for that person, I wouldn't be where I am today. And the reality is, you got to remember that, like, celebrating your journey is about recognizing that what saddened you has now strengthened you, and that what once burdened you has now blessed you. Like, the things that grieve you, the loss that you felt, the things that, like, overwhelmed you and kind of dragged you down are the things that actually have strengthened you and lifted you up. Like, you know, basic workout is like resistance training. And so when you're lifting a weight, when you're, you know, pushing yourself like in some sort of exercise or fashion, all you're doing is leveraging some sort of like resistance against your body to increase your strength. And the same thing happens to us spiritually and emotionally with the different seasons of life. The things that like once saddened you, or like, oh, like this grieved me deeply, is the thing that actually ended up strengthening you. The thing that burdened you and weighed you down is the thing that has now blessed you. You know, I remember a few years ago, you know, we were going through like this brutal season in our marriage, and we've talked about it before and we've shared it before, but essentially we were days away from meeting with like a divorce attorney to figure out like what's the best way to close this chapter of our lives separately. And it was just like super low, horrendous, you know, like brutal, like a 6-month stretch that was on top of a very difficult 1.5-year stretch prior to that. And through a series of like kind of what ended up seeming like miraculous circumstances, God kind of changed our situation and really gave us a second chance at like rebuilding our marriage. It's kind of like He blew it up and just said, okay, start from the ground up. And so we had this opportunity to do that, and so we started doing that, and we started meeting with a counselor. And as we started approaching like the 1-year anniversary of like when our lives and our marriage as we knew it like imploded, you know, when everything just kind of like mushroom clouded over, you know, our family, like we started to sense like this overwhelming feeling of like guilt and shame and like regret of like, oh man, like a year ago this is when it all happened, or like a year ago this is what like we were doing on this day, not realizing that like 2 weeks from now like everything was going to come crashing down. And it was just, I mean, quite honestly, it was like really shameful for me, especially because it was like largely to do with my decisions or my lack of character and integrity. And so we're meeting with our counselor and we're talking to her about that. And one of the things that she said literally changed my life, changed our lives. We were talking to her about this, like coming up on this 1-year day. And she flipped it back to us and said, what are you going to do to reclaim those days? Because you had one bad day in the scheme of your life. And so it's up to you to determine, will you let that one bad day dictate the rest of your days and how you move forward? Or will you choose to say, yeah, that was one bad day, look back on that day, but then celebrate the progress you've made so far? How far you've come, the things that have changed, the things that have become different in the years since that one bad day. And it literally flipped everything on its head, and we started thinking like, well, what could we do? What could we celebrate? What could we memorialize? What could we make like as something significant to recognize like, yeah, this is where we were. So it wasn't like ignoring it or sweeping it under the rug or saying, hey, that never happened. But what could we do to say, this is where we were on this day a year ago, and look at how far we've come. Look at where we are today. Look at what's happened in the years since then. And yeah, it felt like everything was crashing down. But look at the progress that's been made, and let's celebrate that, because a year ago we would never have anticipated that we'd be here a year later. And that's why God told the Israelites, hey, take those days that are mourning, take those feasts. Like, I mean, think about how depressing this would be, that on your annual calendar, you have set aside days to fast, to not eat food. God, that's crappy. But then on top of it, it's not just that you don't eat food, it's that you're going to grieve and mourn. And some of that is part of the human spirit, and it's necessary. But that you have this reminder on every quarter or every, and at least one reminder in every single season that God mentioned. One reminder that says, this is a day where we're going to be sad. Just book it in. Go ahead and plan it. And God says, and again, flip that on its head. Those days that were once for mourning should now be intended for celebration. And the same is true for your wilderness season, the days that you come up on. Time hop is both great and a nightmare for this. Like, I don't know about you, but sometimes I look at the crap I posted on Facebook like 6 years, I'm like, who is this guy? Like, I would defriend him or unfriend him so fast. But like, you've got to like take that day and take advantage of what God has done since that day. And listen, I'll tell you, I'll be the first to admit, I cannot wait like for what happens a year from now. Mm-hmm. I can't wait to look at our church and say, man, look, a year ago it was 10 of us meeting in this apartment, and we didn't have a Christmas tree decorated, and and now look at us. We got a stage full of like pre-lit Christmas trees, and people that are coming, and salvation that's taken place, and people that have been baptized, and lives that have been transformed, and people that have said, hey, this is what I want to be a part of, and hey, I want to be a part of this journey. People who a year from now will be a part of it that weren't even close to knowing it existed. Like, I'm going to be celebrating that part of our journey. I'm going to be on stage. I'm going to be piping it out. I'm going to be pumping it out and saying, this is what happened. This is where we were. This is what God did. 2 people living in Anderson, Podunk, South Carolina, went to a Wells Fargo account or went to Wells Fargo Bank, deposited $300 in a brand new account. The lady said, what's it for? We said, we're starting a church. And she said, oh, that's cute. Like, she didn't say that. That's what she felt. Like that story. That was a year ago. That was a little over a year ago. And I celebrate the journey that we're on now and that we've been on and where God has taken us. So you've got to celebrate your journey. The second thing you got to do is you got to share your story. You got to share your story. This is what God continued on in verses 20 through 23. This is what the Lord of Heaven's army says. People from nations and cities around the world will travel to Jerusalem. The people of one city will say to the people of another, come with us to Jerusalem to ask the Lord to bless us. Let us worship the Lord of Heaven's armies. I'm determined to go. Now, mind you, I'm going to pause right here because this is almost comical. And this time, remember, last week we talked about this, Jerusalem had nothing. Like, it was desolate, completely destroyed. No one was going to Jerusalem. People were fleeing Jerusalem. So God is saying, people from nations are going to come. Mind you, he's talking about the same nations that laughed at Jerusalem and that mocked their God. Wasn't this the God of Israel? Wasn't this the God that was supposed to lead them? And so God's saying, look, they're going to say, come with us to Jerusalem to ask what? To ask the Lord to bless us. Let's worship the Lord of Heaven's armies. I'm determined to go. Many people and powerful nations will come to Jerusalem to seek the Lord of Heaven's armies and to ask for his blessing. And I love how verse 23 puts it. This is what the Lord of Heaven's armies says. In those days, 10 men from different nations and languages of the world will clutch at the sleeve of one Jew, and they will say, please let us walk with you, for we have heard that God is with you. The 10 people from different nations, different languages, will clutch at the sleeve, tug and say, please, 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 tell me what God did for you. I've heard, but I'm here in person. So I've come to hear your story. I've come to hear what God has done for you, and I'm desperate for it. Mm-hmm. I'm eager to see it. I'm eager to receive it. I'm pulling on your sleeve, begging for something that only you can give. And if you're like, wow, that's great. That's significant. But that's for them. Then do this. Replace that word Jew, or the phrase of one Jew, and put your name in the place of it. In those days, 10 men from different nations and languages of the world will clutch at the sleeve of Brooke, and they will say, please let us walk with you, for we have heard that God is with you. Clutch at the sleeve of Eric and say, please let us walk with you, for we have heard that God is with you. Like, God is saying, you've got to share your story, and just like the gates of Jerusalem had to be open to invite these people in, the gates of your story have to be open to let others in as well.
So good.
Because I think there's this thing, like when it comes to our stories, that we're like, we don't want to share it. Mm-hmm. And I think we don't want to share it for one of two reasons. For some of us, it's like, well, I mean, let's be honest, like, I didn't like overcome a crack addiction. Like, I didn't get bailed out of jail. Like, I didn't rob a bank. You know, my story's pretty vanilla. Like, it doesn't, like, I mean, it's not really that interesting, you know, like a pretty decent person, you know, like, grew up in church. You know, I mean, I've done some cool things, but, like, you know, I mean, it's okay. Like, no, who wants to hear that? Or the second camp is, well, like, what if I share my story and people actually know what I really feel? People actually know the real me. Like, what I've actually been through, what I've failed at, what I've struggled with, where I've been trapped or where I've not done well. Like, what if people know that part of me? And then what if they don't like it? And I want to speak to both of those. So first I say this, look, your story is your story. And no one can ever take that away from you. Nor, listen to this part, no one can ever give you that other than God himself. And so don't ever minimize what you've been through or what you've not been through, what you experienced or what you've not experienced. Like, your story matters because you matter. Not just to God, this infinite being, and that we speak about and talk about and say, well, like, yeah, great, God feels good for me, pat myself on the back, like, but nobody else cares. No, like, your story matters. Your point of view matters. Your experiences matter. And so you minimizing your story is you broadcasting to the world that I don't matter. So it may not be that no one else thinks you matter. It may just be that you think you don't matter. And that's something you've got to flip. To the second, I say this. Like, you're not telling your story for the people who don't like it. You're telling it for the one who wants to clutch at your sleeve and say, or at least the 10 who say, like, hey, I want to hold on. Tell me more. Yeah. I want to hang on to this. I want to hear more about this. I want to experience this for myself. Tell me about this God that you follow because I've heard he is with you. Mm-hmm. And I can say, like, this isn't just like some sort of like, you know, Old Testament metaphor like that you apply in some weird way because it doesn't really apply for today. I will tell you this. This applies far more today than it ever did back then. Because we live in a digital world where your story can get broadcast across the nations faster, quicker, easier than it sure could have been some 2,500 years ago. Mm-hmm. And we're living proof of that. You know, we talked about our marriage, and the reality is, like, our marriage is, like, far more public than most people would ever dream of. And in, like, not because we're so lush, but because it's so, like, tragic at times. But as we were going through, like, the difficulties in our marriage, like, God really pressed on Krista that she was supposed to write through it. Like, a lot of people write about, like, the good stuff in their marriage, and that's great, except or until your marriage sucks. You know, like, unfollow, delete, like, I don't care that you're happy and that you're hashtag my forever wedding date. Like, this guy wasn't my forever wedding date on our wedding. And so, like, you know, like, when that's the reality of, like, the life you're living, no one, like, feels great about the person who has it all together. And sure as heck, no one wants to write that or put that out. But God had pressed Krista to write about it. And like I said already, like, most of the issues were related to me. And so on my part, like, it wasn't just like, okay, well, I'm going to let her do her thing. I don't want to, like, overstep my bounds. It's like, no, I'm like, if God's telling her to do this, then there's purpose in it. Like, there's reason to it. And on my part, like, when people followed up with me about it, like, I was pretty honest and transparent about this is, like, the reality of what happened. This is why it happened. Like, I mean, it's not really fun or comfortable to say, well, like, I almost blew up my marriage or I almost lost everything or I'm in the process of losing everything because I was addicted to pornography or because I racked up a bunch of debt, like, unbeknownst to my wife and, like, kept it hidden and got caught doing all this stuff. Like, none of that stuff is, like, becoming, to say it lightly. Yet, we felt like this is what God wanted us to do. And again, it wasn't to, like, attract attention to ourselves. Krista was very, like, respectful and not to, like, just put, like, all dirty laundry out there, but to say this is what God is teaching me through the mess. We're not okay, like, things aren't feeling okay, and I don't know if they ever will be okay, but I know who God is and I know what God is speaking to me through this mess. And so we shared our story. And you know what we found? Some people don't like that. And you kind of expected that. You know, like, you kind of expected there'd be a group of people who wouldn't like that. But we didn't expect who it would come from. Like, we didn't think our family would be the people that didn't like it. And that would be the most vocal about not liking it. And it wasn't like all of our families. It was just a couple people on each side and, like, who wanted to, you know, make it an issue because it made them uncomfortable, or because maybe it created, it cast them in a light that wasn't very becoming because they're our family or they're, connected to us or whatever. But what we realized, like, we didn't write that or we didn't share that part of our story for that person. We shared it for the people who were struggling in their marriage, for the people who felt like, you know what, I don't know where to turn. I look on Instagram, all I see are people like posting pictures of their wedding rings and like their cute family photos and their flannel shirts and jeans and boots somewhere on some trail. Like, I'm tired of seeing this stuff. Like, we shared it for that person. And you know what we found in response to that? Like, we've seen this come to light. Like, we've seen this happen. In fact, as recent as July, we were sitting here in this living room and with a couple sitting right on that couch who live in Indiana, who reached out to us. One of them was coming here for work, decided to bring her husband because she felt like they needed to come and meet with us because of our story. People we knew, like I knew him from before. She had been following Chris's blog. She reached out to us, said, can we like buy dinner, bring it over, sit and talk? We're like, okay, we don't care. Like, anybody come over for dinner? Yeah, come over. And so like, we eat 7 times a week, might as well do it with somebody. And so, like, or at least 7 times.
Especially if they're paying.
And yeah, if they're paying. I mean, curry and, some basmati rice, I'm in. And so they come over, so we're hanging out talking. So Chris and I just asked him, like, so why'd you guys want to meet with us? Like, why are you in our living room traveling 1,000 miles away to talk with us? And her response was so profound. She just said this, like, well, I feel like you guys hear from God, and we want to know how. Like, in the chaos that we're in this, like, season that's, like, spinning around, like, everything is a mess, things aren't going planned, and, like, it's not good. And somehow you guys have gone through that with the clarity of this is who God is, and this is what God is saying, and we just want to know how. And it's not because, I don't say that to, like, say, wow, we're so spiritual, we're so good, because we're actually so messy and so wrong is what got them interested in what was happening in our lives. But it started because we shared our story. And so these people came and traveled to be here, to clutch at our sleeve and say, please tell us about this God and that you're hearing from. Like, we've heard about him, but we want to hear from him as well. And then I was reminded, speaking of time out, this past week, a year ago this time, we were like, spent 5 weeks in the UK and Europe, and so we're hanging out over there with Freedom Church, working alongside of them, doing different things. And like kind of last minute, they just asked Krista to speak at their women's event. And so, but you know what they asked? And this isn't like to reduce her. They didn't ask Krista to speak because she's so eloquent. They didn't ask her to speak because she's so confident a speaker. What they asked her to speak on was like, would you share your story? To a room full of women from Belgium, England, Wales, Scotland, Australia, Netherlands, Poland. Like, would you share your story with these people? A few weeks ago, I had an email from a guy. He's a pastor at a church in Munich, Germany. I met him like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Never been to Munich, Germany. Don't have any existing plans to go to Munich, Germany. But he reached out to me and he said, hey, we're doing this event on New Year's Eve. It's 1,500 young adults, 18 to 25. And we thought like you would be a great person to be able to share your story about your family, to encourage and inspire these young adults to pursue like the right things when it comes to family and in the right way. Would you be able to put a video and share your story? Caveat, in 7 minutes or less. But I'm like, Munich, Germany, 1,500 people I've never met. I literally know one person in Germany. Up until a couple weeks ago, I met 2 other guys. Like, and somehow what they're interested in is not like, are you theologically sound? Not are you like the most talented or dynamic speaker? But would you share your story because your story is worthy of being heard? And that's what happens when you share your story. Mm-hmm. Not just for us, because we didn't set out to get like national or global acclaim, and we sure haven't gotten global acclaim. But we set out to share our story, and God started bringing opportunities. And this is what I want to say to you, like, whatever medium you have, use it to share your story. God has given you an opportunity. God has given you a platform. God has given you a sphere of influence around in which you can share your story, no matter how small or insignificant you may feel about it. It has the potential for big and massive impact. Mm-hmm. And so whether that's writing a blog or starting a blog, whether that's, doing it on video, whether that's like writing it down and just kind of having it there, or speaking to a friend on a subway commute and sharing part of what you're going through, or sharing your experiences, or encouraging someone else who's been where you, or who is in where you've been. Like, whatever the case or whatever the way it may be, use that medium to share your story, because there are people desperate for it, people who want to be blessed by it. And you may think, well, I don't have the financial means to bless people. I don't have like the physical space to house someone, to bless someone. But you can bless them with who God is and who God has been in your life, because God, remember, wants to elevate you so that you can become both the symbol and the source of blessing in the lives of other people. And this is what I want to encourage you with. I want to like just kind of put it out there. And this isn't like necessarily the same as last week, but I want to encourage you to like practice sharing your story. And here's how. Really easy, really simple. You can write it out like in an email or text, and you can email it to me. And I'm not going to like share it on any sort of like crazy platform. I'm not going to like put you on blast on Twitter or turn you into a GIF or a meme or something. But you can write it out, like, and the only person that'll see it beside me is Krista. And you can email it out or email it to us this week. And all this is just practice. Like you're like, oh, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not sure where to start. I'm not like certain what to do. It's simple. Hi, I'm Andrea. This is my story. And there you go. Like, boom, introduction. I know like that works because that's what they're teaching my daughter in first grade. Yeah. This is how you write a story.
Yeah.
Or if you're like, you know what, I don't want to write because I have bad grammar and you'll make fun of me, like you can record on video. 30 seconds, a minute, whatever, record it on your cell phone, and just text it or email it. Like, it won't take long, it won't take much. And again, same thing, we're not going to share it or tweet it out to everyone, look at this, she's got a booger in her nose, or like nothing like that. But all this is intended to just help you practice sharing your story. Because here's what I believe. Like, one day, Meta Church will be a story that's told. It's already a story that's being told. And I'm not talking about like, newspaper write-ups or magazine write-ups or like TV or media. Like, that crap may come, it may not come. I don't really care. Like, we'll deal with it one day if and when it comes. But what I'm talking about are people who come and say, I heard this is the church where people come and they experience transformation and life change. Like, I heard about you because people that were coming here moved to some other part of the world, and I've seen how they've lived. I know they know God, and I know they walk with God, and I had to come, be a part of it, and experience it for myself. And the reason that will be true for Meta Church is because it was first true for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you start by sharing your story. So practice it, send it, and as I wrap up this series, and wrap up this message, if there's one thing I want you to take hold of, or one thing I want you to remember, is this. The reason we brave the wilderness is not so we can wander aimlessly, but so that we can wonder expectantly. Because what's on the other side of your wilderness is greater than what you've left behind. And that should create great expectation. What could God do? What will God do? What is God planning that I don't even have a foretaste or can't even imagine at this point in time? Because this is exactly what's happening with the church. What we don't see or what we don't know is only just kind of like the tip of the iceberg of what God is actually having planned or has in store for what we become. And so you brave the wilderness not because you're just like, well, here I am, like, oh, that's pretty, okay, like, I'm by myself, what do I do next? It's not to wander around like aimless in the desert or in some forest, but it's to wonder with expectation, what will I find on this journey? Who will I become through this process? How will God use it? Who will I meet that benefits from it? Mm-hmm. This is why we brave the wilderness. This is why we walk forward. This is why we celebrate the journey, and this is why we share the story, because God has great things on the other side that are far greater than what we've left behind.